3 criminal charges dropped against the former president of the United States. Think about that sentence. In itself, an extraordinary sentence. We'll get to the political consequences in a moment, but first, you are looking live right now at Capitol Hill, where today 352 members of Congress, a majority of Democrats and Republicans, voted to either force a sale of TikTok or potentially have it blocked from U.S. app stores.
This is not an attempt to ban TikTok. It's an attempt to make TikTok better. Tic-tac-toe. A winner.
That's the question that we should be asking. Who is going to buy it? Who will be the next to control the data of over 170 million Americans?
So as you heard there, roughly half of the country, kids, young adults, business owners, even politicians, presidential candidates are users. So why is this the issue where Donald Trump and many Republicans have differences? Come on in. I'm Blake Berman. This is The Hill on NewsNation. All right, here we are. Here we go. Hanging out with us today, Chris Steyerwalt, host of The Hill Sunday and senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. Ashley Davis, former George W. Bush White House official. Max Rose, the former Democratic congressman from the state of New York. Mark Lotter is the former press secretary to Vice President Pence. And on remote, Mick Mulvaney, former Trump White House chief of staff, NewsNation contributor, hanging out with us from the Keys. Hello, Mick. Hello to you all. Packed show today. Mulvaney's Mick. The Hot Mic with Mick coming up later. You're going to break down some new polling. Congressman Tim Burchett coming up soon. Congressman Auchincloss coming up soon. But first, we begin, of course, with this big vote today in the House with TikTok. It's been a remarkable 72 hours when you think about it. It started Monday, Chris, with former President Trump saying, you know what? I'm against a ban, essentially. That's against many House Republicans and how they voted today. What's going on here?
Well, so Trump eats alone. He does not. Republicans love this issue. Whatever you think about the merits of the legislation, this is good for them. It's China baiting. It's anti-social media. This is an election year. This is red meat. This is what they want to do. Trump, we know that he had a meeting with the U.S. backer Jeff Yass out of this, who has a massive stake in this, and he came out. Elon Musk also, who is draws a lot of water on the Republican side, also came out. We can maybe understand why Elon Musk did, because, of course, he doesn't want China to do to his properties what the United States is threatening to do to TikTok, and he also probably doesn't want Meta or somebody to take it over. So there's a spider web of interests and things going on here. What mostly hasn't been discussed in all of this is the legitimate question that some Republicans have raised around the First Amendment rights of people to speak and be heard, and that will now happen in the Senate.
Why did Trump go against the most of the party here?
I think there's multiple reasons. I think obviously Chris highlighted some of them. I think actually turning over more power to Meta is probably one of the biggest in terms of his involvement on that. But this is an issue that brought MTG and Nancy Pelosi
that's why we played
in agreement. Well, and when other than naming post offices, they don't agree on anything.
I mean, 350 members of the House, that's 3/4, give or take. 352.
Right. But the interesting thing is only 15 Republicans, probably on the more conservative side, voted against it, but 50 Democrats. So, I mean, I think only 15 went against kind of Trump. I think that Trump's saying he doesn't support the legislation was kind of light. Like, I don't know how much he's really, lobbying members.
I was doing a little research on this, going back to my broadcast 101 classes back in the day in college. This is not unusual. We have long basically put prohibitions on foreign influences owning media companies. Now, that's been lessened in recent years, but even if a foreign company wanted to buy a radio or television station, you have to prove that you're not of basically one of our adversaries.
They're not buying anything.
They already own it.
They own it.
Right.
So this is us saying, and the one bone I have to pick with this that really hacks me off is, so the United States said to ByteDance, you have to bring this all onshore in the United States. You're a big security threat. So they spent $1 billion. And and they did what they called Project Texas. We're going to bring everything to Texas. We're going to run it out of Texas. We're going to do it all. Oracle, the U.S. defense contractor, was going to oversee we're good to go. And they needed a waiver. They needed a waiver from the Biden administration so that they could engage in unfair hiring practices and only hire Americans, which is illegal. You can't have that as your rule. And they couldn't get the waiver. And this, I look at this and I see so much politics being played with this and not enough grown-up discussion.
Speaking of politics, former Democratic congressman, you think this is bad politics for Democrats in an election year?
Yeah, only the Democrats would say, okay, let me take one of my significant core constituencies and vote to ban something they all love 7 days before a major election.
Yeah.
So
that's why I'm shocked this went forward.
The politics to me are nuts. It's crazy that this happened as quickly as it did. Remember, this has been out there for
that's
more
what I'm saying,
than
72 hours,
a year.
Like we woke up on Monday and
the bill was tweaked though recently.
No, but I guess my point is that it looked like it was all dead. Right? Because there were Jamal Bowman and many folks on the left were leading pretty significant efforts to say this is actually about supporting small businesses, too.
Right.
Many people are leading, very successful businesses on TikTok. But there's one vote in opposition to this that I found the most significant, and that was Jim Himes.
Jim Himes, I'm going to get to it.
Yeah.
I want to ask Congressman Auchincloss about that. Hold on one second, though. Congressman, I know you're out there, Mulvaney. I want to bring you in real quick. Your thoughts on all this?
Yeah, I'm actually looking at the list of the 15 Republicans. You guys are talking about the Democrats, and I'm very interested to hear about Himes and some of the other folks who voted against it on that side. But the list, according to the Hill newspaper that went out, said Marjorie Taylor Greene actually voted against it. So it's sort of a mishmash of, I'm looking at the list here, a mishmash of the hardcore sort of right-wing MAGA folks and then the real sort of libertarian wing of the party, the Thomas Masseys of the world, and then the folks who really take the Constitution very, very seriously, like Tom McClintock. Not that they don't all take it seriously, but McClintock will change his votes oftentimes on topics that are popular, but he considers to be unconstitutional. So it is a mishmash, but that MTG vote was interesting to me, if that's accurate.
All right, Congressman Jake Auchincloss, member of the China Select Committee, Democratic congressman from Massachusetts, come on in, and I appreciate you waiting there for a few minutes. I'm sure you've been listening to some of this. Congressman, thanks for being back. Here on the Hill, can you explain your vote to us, why you voted the way you did and how you see this?
Not just a yes vote, also a co-sponsor of the bill, and the reason I helped lead the charge on this bill is actually not primarily about geopolitics, certainly not interested in the investment banking discussion about who's going to buy it. To me, it's about mental health of our youth. I'm one of the youngest parents in Congress. I spend a lot of time talking to other parents, both inside the chamber, but most importantly in my district. And what I hear is that these social media corporations are making our families miserable. They profit by keeping kids hooked on screen time. They're plundering our political discourse. They are monetizing the attention span of our youth, and Congress has got to step up and hold them accountable. We can't do that, though, if TikTok answers to Xi Jinping and not to the United States Congress.
Why not Meta? Why not Snapchat?
Absolutely.
Go down the line.
And that is exactly what I have done. I have dropped legislation just this week to hold all social media corporations, Meta, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, accountable for protecting our youth online. But again, all those ones that you just mentioned are already subject to U.S. law. TikTok is not. So this bill is the first step to bringing parity to how we regulate these social media corporations. And I know what we're about to hear. We're about to hear First Amendment concerns. I really want to just address that directly because it's really misguided. I have spent the last 10 years of my life defending unpopular speech.
If you don't mind, because Congressman Jim Himes, and I know you were talking, you heard us talking about this. So for the audience at home and listening on Sirius XM, he is the top Democrat on the Intelligence Committee. You would think that that would be an automatic vote to basically say, you know what, let's get rid of TikTok. But here's what he says, quote, I have more insight than most into the online threats posed by our adversaries. But one of the key differences between us and those adversaries is the fact that they shut down, he goes on to say, social media platforms. We do not. Did Himes get it wrong, Congressman?
So again, this bill does not ban TikTok. This bill forces TikTok to be subject to United States law. And it is well in the bounds of the First Amendment. The First Amendment provides for the freedom of speech. Any American can say whatever they want on political matters of the day. That is sacrosanct. But freedom of speech is not freedom of reach. You do not have a constitutional right to have your statement amplified by the Chinese Communist Party to 100 million viewers. An algorithm subject to Xi Jinping does not have constitutional rights. So this bill was well crafted to avoid any First Amendment concerns. It was well crafted to avoid Bill of Attainder concerns. Now, Jim and I may disagree about the nature of the national security threat, but again, the primary reason I push this bill is about the mental health of our youth. We need all of these social media corporations to be subject to congressional oversight.
Congressman Auchincloss, we'll leave it there. I know we'll talk to you again soon on this, especially as this potentially moves forward in the Senate. Appreciate the time joining us, I believe, live from Massachusetts. Congressman, thanks so much.
Good evening.
Yep. As he was talking, you all took issue. Well, I mean, I could see you taking issue with it. You're a Democrat.
Don't give away what we do here. You can't give away the.
No, you're a Democrat who took issue to what he just said. So I'm curious.
So I think here's the thing. This is a ban for one very simple reason above all else. It is said that it's...
He doesn't agree. You don't agree with that.
I don't think it's a ban.
When you
used to be, the old bill was a ban.
When you say that a company that's worth hundreds of billions of dollars has to be sold by a specific date, what you are doing is you're destroying the value of that company. Because what anyone who's a prospective buyer of that company is going to do is wait until the very last minute, and it will be a fire sale. That is the most anti-capitalist, anti-free market, authoritarian thing to do that I could possibly imagine.
It is.
It is a ban.
By the way, last word.
No, because I've got a whole thing of how this is really going to become real or not. But that's a whole Senate conversation if you want to have it or not. But also, Mick, I do want to tell Mick too. Marjorie Taylor Greene she did vote for the bill, but that was against the bill. But that's probably because of the Trump negative side of it more than anything.
She said if we want to be serious about stopping a foreign adversary, if we wanted to be serious about stopping China, we would stop China from buying our farmland. This is really about controlling data. If we cared about Americans' data, we would stop the sale of Americans' data universally.
I don't want to run past, though, what the congressman said. Okay. Which is, this isn't about national security. This is about controlling what our children are able to see. I was stunned by that because, and he said, yes, and we're going to get them under our control, and then we're going to get these other companies under our control. That's basically what the critics of this bill are alleging. The critics of this bill are saying it's a Trojan horse. They're going to use this control over TikTok, and then they're going to go after other forms of speech and other platforms. And he just said that's what they were going to do.
By the way, the former president of the United States had 3 criminal charges dropped against him today. Process that sentence for a second. We're sort of sanitized to it in the moment, but that actually happened in the state of Georgia today. Still 10 charges against Donald Trump for allegations of racketeering. He, of course, denies all wrongdoing. Mick Mulvaney, we will learn also in the upcoming days here if Fani Willis will be kicked off that case in Georgia. But 3 charges dropped against Donald Trump. Of course, still 10 in that state. I wonder politically what you feel this means for Donald Trump going forward.
Well, so far it's the same message, right? Which is it's a win for Donald Trump. Donald Trump is using these cases to his political advantage, and this is going to be no exception. Now he's going to be able to say, look, we all know they admit that at least 3 of the charges against me were so weak they shouldn't have been brought. I think all of the cases bear that same sort of that same weakness. He's going to continue to use this. Keep in mind, this is not a legal proceeding in his mind. This is a political process, and he's one of the best at it in the whole world. So you could imagine him to use this to his advantage. And this is going to be the campaign. Blake, we talked yesterday about the longest campaign in history, the earliest that both parties have picked their candidates for the general election. This is the campaign. What you see in the courtroom for the next 7 months is going to be central to Donald Trump's attempts to regain the presidency again.
I got to run real quick, but does anybody disagree with what Mick said?
No, I think it helps them. And knowing, what the judge said is that, the racketeering part of the case is still in effect. But, I mean, who in America really knows what the racketeering part of the case really means? It's just that the 3 cases.
When you see charges drop like this, I'm curious, as a Democrat,
when someone's wearing a shirt like Mick's, you can't. you can't possibly.
Mick's in the Conch Republic. Mick is in the Conch Republic.
Say it when we start.
Hey,
I'm always picking on.
We're just jealous that we're not in the Keys hanging out with Mulvaney.
That shirt really balances it out for me.
It's antique cars, I think, or something.
Max, real quickly, they made me wear a nice shirt and a tie for State of the Union, and that's the only nice shirt and tie I have down here, so it's this the rest
is your revenge.
You look great, brother. You look fantastic.
He does look great. All right, coming up here on the Hill, did you hear what one Texas Republican said about his party and the southern border?
In 2018, we had the House, we had the Senate, we had the White House, and we had a bigger majority than we have today. and we utterly failed to secure the border.
That's a Republican saying that. So does he have a point? The panel weighs in next on the Hill. And still to come, we will see what is on Mick Mulvaney's mind, including the reconciliation of Donald Trump and Nancy Mace. Hot mic with Mick later in the show. Plus, other side of the break, you're going to be breaking down some new polling.
We're going to do a little time machine. We're going to talk about how we are now versus how we were in 2020. If we've got the same candidates, we've got the same race, let's see how we were doing now versus how we were doing at this point.
General election, brand new poll. Steyerwalt going to break that down. Stay with us. You're watching The Hill here on NewsNation. All right, welcome back to The Hill. So the rematch between President Biden and Donald Trump essentially set after last night's primary. Both men now have enough delegates to officially become their party's presidential nominee when the conventions take place a few months from now later this summer. Now, fresh off the milestone, some new polling shows where both stand in the race for the White House. But how does it compare to this point 4 years ago? Steyerwalt here to break it all down. Chris.
Fresh is not a word that I think most voters associate with those candidates. Okay, so we have a pretty good poll. We'll call this not exactly the Primo stuff, but this is very Primo adjacent from USA Today, Suffolk, and this is how it looks now versus how it looked the first time. So in full disclosure, the first time that this was polled after they had won their nominations, it was April, not March, because of how quickly it happened this time. But this is roughly where you are. And you see that the race is basically flipped from where it was 4 years ago. And then look at this. Look at this next screen. Caleb did all this work. We should show off his great work. Here you go. Job approval rating for the incumbent at this point, basically the same. So the race looks the same, except for Trump's got the whip hand. He is driving. And then look at this. And this should be very interesting to you. The percent of undecided voters. Not surprisingly, almost half as many people are undecided now as they were then because they know a lot more. So with that smaller share of undecided voters, what matters? What matters is persuadable voters. And this is key. I want you to think about this. So in this poll, a quarter of all of the voters said they could change their minds, right? They might change their minds. And this is how they break down inside of those people, what percentage of their votes go where. Now look at those unique individuals there at the edge. 75, 63, 94%. Kennedy, Cornel West, and Jill Stein. Whose votes are those going to be later on? They're not probably going to be. I don't think there's many Cornel West, Donald Trump crossovers. I don't think there's a lot of Jill Stein crossovers. RFK Jr., we've talked about, it's a stranger brew, but that's what Biden needs to do. He needs to get those big numbers from those third-party candidates to roll back to him. But this is the last graphic. I promise you, people, it's the last graphic, but it's the one that you have to remember. 15% of the respondents in this poll are what we call, or what I don't call them this because it's mean, double haters, the people who dislike, have negative views of both Biden and Trump. And of those people, Trump is winning. So this is when I tell you it's a race to the bottom and Donald Trump can win it. Among people who dislike both of these candidates, Trump is doing better. And that's why what Joe Biden needs more than anything else is to find a way to get those double haters, and those persuadables to go ahead and flop back in his direction to square this up.
Interesting. Steyerwalt breaks it down.
There it is. I did it.
Takeaways?
I broke it down.
Very good.
The challenge for Joe Biden on whether it's winning the double haters, whether it's winning still the few undecided voters left, is his record. I mean, this is still going to be, and it's an economy stupid. It's now it's immigration and securing the border stupid. And Joe Biden is on the negative of both of those. And I've seen similar polling today that also shows whose policies would you be better financially under. Right. Trump wins, walking away.
This is what you'll hear out of Republicans. Is that right?
Well, I mean, look, the thing is, Joe Biden, the Donald Trump's greatest disadvantage politically is that he always wants it to be about him. And if this election is about Donald Trump, he will lose it, right? It has to be, just as Mark said, if it's an election about Joe Biden, Joe Biden will lose, for sure. But if it becomes an election about Donald Trump, Joe Biden will win it. And that's the thing about when you have two universally known and mostly unpopular political figures.
Took the congressman just did a former congressman.
My facial expressions are...
Don't read into them or no?
No.
Look, what did you make of what he said?
I think you're being ridiculous, and I think you're being ridiculous.
All right.
So here's the deal, okay? One, for the last 2 years, all people have been hearing about Donald Trump are the court cases, and the court cases are actually, I think, in a sense, bolstering his numbers a little bit because it aids his grievance tour. What people are about to hear, rightfully so, is hundreds of millions of dollars of messaging that correctly paints what the Trump years actually were, which was filled with chaos and incompetency.
Low prices.
One second. So yes, Eureka, an election is both about your own record and the record of your opponents. But the other thing that these polls are not taking into account is that economic sentiment is a lagging indicator. And right now, as you're seeing inflation numbers continue to be stagnant while growth is skyrocketing, you will see those economic approval numbers continue to shoot up. And they are trending in the right direction. So this is, look, if you're a presidential candidate right now who is peaking 6 or 7 months prior to the election, that's not a good thing. What is a good news story, though, is where the Biden campaign is headed, and it's only going up.
You would say what? Or do you want to?
Well, but no, you and I should talk about this because you always say
being ridiculous.
Yeah, because
but I said the same. I said the same thing that you did. I just was meaner to Biden when I said it. So, which is, if it's about Trump and what the Biden campaign is going to do is exactly what you said, and put $1 billion worth of negative campaign ads against Donald Trump up his nose and remind everybody about January 6th and chaos and all that stuff. And that's the election Joe Biden can win.
So the economic numbers have to get better by June or July, not by October or November.
So speaking of the economic numbers, just show the graph real quick, if we can, because Bloomberg has a misery index, which basically takes into account what inflation has been the last 4 years and what the employment rate is now. And that top line, you see it there? I feel like I'm doing a Steyerwalt. That top line you see there, that's the misery index in the 7 key swing states: Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. That top line is higher than what you're seeing in blue states and red states, leading to the question, if that's the case in the swing states, how does the incumbent overcome that? Just something to think about. Still much more.
Like Berman breaks it down.
Berman breaks it down?
I like that. All right. That's pretty good.
Still much more ahead. Nick, I'm coming to you soon, I promise. Hang on by. Hunter Biden says he won't testify publicly. The son of President Biden turning down an invitation to appear before the House Oversight Committee. So what's their reaction? I'll ask the Republican Congressman Tim Burchett, who serves on that committee, and he's the Prime Minister of Israel, an ally of the United States. So why is Benjamin Netanyahu named in the U.S. terror threat assessment? The Hill returns. Stay with us.
2018, we had the House, we had the Senate, we had the White House, and we had a bigger majority than we have today, and we utterly failed to secure the border. Totally dropped the ball. Didn't do it.
Welcome back. That is Congressman Chip Roy reacting to the early retirement of the Republican Congressman Ken Buck from Colorado. Roy, who's a Republican from Texas, as you heard there, ripped his Republican colleagues for what did not happen when Republicans ran Washington in 2017 and 2018. Mick, Mark, Ashley, Republicans, got any issue with what Roy said there? Mick, I'll start with you.
Yeah, a little bit. Chip is not a dumb guy. There's no question about it. And I get the frustration. I would take some issue with that we did utterly nothing. Maybe Congress did utterly nothing in 2018, but the White House was working to secure the border. It's one of the reasons you've seen the dramatic difference between the Trump administration policies on immigration and the Biden administration policies. But I get the frustration. Here's what I tell Chip, because it's a short conversation to have. Chip, yeah, but we didn't control 60 votes in the Senate, and the filibuster prevented us from doing anything. The real question is, why didn't the Democrats do anything about this back in 2008, 2009, when they had 60 votes in the Senate and were filibuster-proof? But that's a conversation you have to have with Max. I get the frustration. I understand it. We also didn't reduce spending in 2018. Right. Neither did we repeal health care in 2018 when we had those votes. So I get it, but it's not as easy as Chip makes it out to be.
You got Lauder, you got any issues with it?
No, I think Mick's exactly right. I mean, you have to have those votes, and I remember working, in the campaign in the White House on those issues. The president was putting forward immigration plans. He even offered a plan for the Dreamers, and we couldn't get 60 votes. We couldn't even get the wall.
But people don't want to at home don't want to hear 60 votes or this many votes. They get something done.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say. I do agree with Mick, and I do agree with Roy and you on this, but that's what Democrats are saying right now. They can't get 60 votes, and I keep saying this on this show, especially no one wants to hear that. The president of the United States is in control, so that he needs to fix it. And I think it's just
okay.
And by the way, for those who
Trump did fix it,
and for those out there who suggest eliminating the 60-vote threshold, especially from the conservative side, imagine how much worse Obamacare would have been. At least we stopped them with the 60 votes.
I hear you, but and Steigerwalt and I have had this conversation before. I'm not a big fan of the filibuster as it exists today for exactly the reason that Ashley just mentioned. The public doesn't understand it. If you want to do a filibuster, talk. Do the Mr. Smith goes to Washington stuff. Don't just sign a piece of paper or voice your opinion, then go to dinner. The filibuster is broken, and it's one of the reasons the country struggles.
All right, well, come on in real quick. Congressman Tim Burchett, Republican from the state of Tennessee, also a member of the Foreign Affairs and Oversight Committees. Congressman, thanks for being back here on the Hill. Appreciate your time as always, sir. What would you say to Chip Roy?
Well, he is correct. It's both parties, actually. It's the uniparty. And hello to my buddy Max. Haven't seen you in a while, Max. Good seeing you, brother.
It's good to see you, brother.
Hey, but I'll tell you this, it's both parties. They sold us out. The National Chambers of Commerce have done everything they can within their will to stop this. In both parties, it's the uniparty. It's not the people like me and Max that, I'm the 435th most powerful member of Congress. These chambers of commerce block national chambers, not your local. But, they want somebody on your roof that if they fall off, they're not going to get, they're not going to be able to sue you because they're afraid they'll be deported. They do this every time. It's the uniparty. They cut these deals, and it's all about money. It's not about America. It's about somebody making a dollar, and that's what it's all about. You can say majority or minority, but that's what it's all about. And I've argument too many times since I've been there.
Let me ask you about a couple things going on, Congressman. Hunter Biden. You're a member of the Oversight Committee. Hunter Biden today pushing back on the prospect of testifying publicly in a week's time. He gave the closed-door deposition. What would you say to Hunter Biden and his attorney who say they're not showing up publicly on that date or at all?
Probably politically it's not a good move, but legally it's a good move because he doesn't want to get on there with Tony Bobolinsky, he's got a great name, by the way. That's a really cool name. But he doesn't want to get on there with him because this guy can name dates, times, places, amounts of money, who was in the room, who was on the phone, and just down to minute details. And all these other people can do just the same. He doesn't want to have to sit up there and have to defend that without his attorney in his ear. So I would say legally it's the good move. Politically, it's not a good move on the front end because obviously rules for thee, not for me. And he's shirking the committee, and that'll remain to be seen. I think they're running out the clock, though, because I'm like most America, and I'm guilty of this, too. I want my pizzas in about 30 minutes or less, and that's about my dadgum attention span. We're going to move on to another pretty soon, and America already has.
All right, let me ask you about another topic. You are on the UAP front. Obviously, there's a push now to get a committee formed about this. We had your colleague, Congressman Eric Burleson, on the show the other day, and he said this. Watch.
They weren't transparent to us in a SCIF setting, so they could have brought forward evidence. They could have explained what these special access programs actually do, but they are not willing to do that with Congress.
He argued essentially that the Pentagon has not been forthright with its report that it released last week that essentially said nothing to see here on UAPs. Congressman, do you feel that the Pentagon is lying?
Yeah, they're lying. They look, since 1947, they've told us these things don't exist. And yet they spend tens of millions of dollars on these things, on studying something, yet they won't release the reports. They're redacted. They look like somebody shot them with a 12-gauge shotgun. Look, and there's the famous Tic Tac videos that were filmed by some very brave pilots, American pilots, military pilots. Then they say that does not exist. Look, I'm not about, I don't care about the flying saucers, the little green men. I've got my own opinion about that. I just want transparency. Why are we spending tens of millions of dollars on these things? And why do we trust a Pentagon that has failed every audit, that has lost over $500 billion in assets, allegedly? And then how do we punish them this last NDAA, a bipartisan bill? We gave them $20 billion new dollars. They're an arrogant bunch. They lie. It's about money. It's about power. It's all the things that run Washington. And we know it. Over half the American public believes there's something else out there. And honestly, do you think we're the best that God can do? And if UFOs were to come, I guarantee they wouldn't come to Washington, D.C., because there is obviously no intelligent life down there.
Congressman, we'll leave it there. Congressman Tim Burchett. Thank you, sir. Appreciate the time. We'll talk to you soon. Wow. Great.
No one's better than
I was getting Jim Traficant vibes there at the end. Remember Beam Me Up, Scotty? That's the primo stuff.
It's fascinating to talk to him.
Funniest member of Congress.
It's always entertaining talking to him. All right, but before we get to break, by the way, something that caught my attention earlier today. Did you see this? From the 2024 annual threat assessment that's put forth by the intelligence community, it says of the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, quote, that his viability as a leader, as well as his governing coalition of far-right and ultra-Orthodox parties that pursued hardline policies on Palestinian and security issues, may be in jeopardy. The reason why I bring this up, Max, is because this is a threat assessment, and Benjamin Netanyahu is mentioned in it. Axios reporting suggests that this is a signal that is being sent by the White House on Netanyahu. Why is he in a threat assessment?
Well, you just said it, because it's undeniably a shift being sent by the White House. And what the White House is seeking to do, I think, for clearly factual reasons, because I do believe this White House has always put national security first, but there's undeniably that there's an electorate speaking behind it.
Is it appropriate to put him in a threat assessment?
It's probably written by one of the 51 people who signed the Hunter Biden his misinformation letter, so I give it zero credibility.
Look, you can't, the point that they're making here is that Netanyahu's agenda and his policies at this point are significantly adding to instability in the region, and that is a legitimate position.
Or the unrest of the country more than it was naming him, but his leadership, the unrest of the country, does it turn the whole country into turmoil if he's no longer a leader? I don't know if it was necessarily like him.
Do you think it's appropriate to put him in a threat assessment?
This is Putin, Kim Jong-un. Leaders of countries are in states all the time. In threat assessments all the time. I don't think this is anything unusual.
I side with the Yinzer, the lady from Pittsburgh.
The lady from Pittsburgh. All right, moving on. And coming up here on the Hill, they have had a rocky relationship. The Republican Congresswoman Nancy Mace from South Carolina once criticized Donald Trump for January 6th. Well, now she is getting his endorsement for re-election. What happened here? Hot Mic with Mick, warming up. And coming up on the other side of the break, you're watching The Hill here on NewsNation. Stay with us. And what looks like a bit of a flip-flop here. 2 years ago, after South Carolina Congresswoman Nancy Mace criticized Trump for his role in January 6th, he called her, quote, an absolutely terrible candidate whose remarks and attitude have been devastating for her community and not at all representative of the Republican Party, so on and so forth. Fast forward to this weekend, and Trump issued a ringing endorsement of Mace. Mick, come on in. Hot Mic with Mick. What is going on here?
Yeah, I can't get this one out of my head that Vittert came up with on the night of the State of the Union, which was how Donald Trump loves the romance of reconciliation. So there's certainly some of that. Trump does like it when prodigal sons and daughters come back. He certainly likes that. There's a bunch more going on in this race. However, Catherine Templeton, very prominent South Carolinian, has run for a statewide office before, has announced that she's intending to file. She's being backed in this race by Kevin McCarthy. Of course, McCarthy and Trump used to be close. Not so much. Now that Kevin is not, Speaker of the House, Trump doesn't have much need for him or use for him. There's also another angle here, which is in the background, and Steyerwalt's going to love this. There is another candidate who's thinking about running in this race. Marshall C. Sanford Jr. Mark Sanford, the former governor, the former hiker of the Appalachian Trail, still has a couple of $1 million in his account. And the rumor is he's considering running. Trump hates him, and Trump might have made this move actively to discourage Mark Sanford from entering the race.
Okay.
Well, Donald Trump's a single issue voter, and he is the issue. So he's a totally binary choice. You're for me, you're against me. If she's for him, then that's okay.
But there's been a lot of different instances between when he said that about Nancy until now that she was one of the flip votes and voting McCarthy out. I mean, like, there's been a lot of things of her getting back into the good graces of
and
Trump.
She's moved in a Bobertian direction, I think would be the
She
term.
voted today against TikTok.
Yeah, she did.
Matt Gaetz once said to me, he said, there's three things I believe in: legalizing marijuana, ending our forever wars, and supporting Donald Trump at all costs. Donald Trump only agrees with me on one of those three things, but he'll forever love me because I picked the right thing. And that's all this is.
I remember Lion Ted Cruz, little Marco Rubio, and everyone comes home again.
All right, speaking of things that we all remember, Mick, it's one of the most talked about stories during your tenure as chief of staff. Here's this headline that seemingly came out of nowhere from Newsweek. Donald Trump could try to buy Greenland once more if he's back at a second term. Huh?
You preface that by saying it's one of the most talked about stories. By the way, it would come in 20th at the other stories that we talked about more with that thing. But yes, that's just because there was never any shortage of news. We used to call him a newsmaker. Look, I liked this idea. This was not the craziest thing ever. The country used to do that. We bought Alaska. We bought part of Arizona from Mexico. We do these things, and it wasn't a terrible idea. It got panned in the media, and of course it fell apart. I think Denmark owns Greenland, and they weren't selling it at that time. But this is not a crazy idea. You file it away. If Trump gets reelected, maybe he'll talk about it again. Maybe Biden should be talking about it anyway.
It's not a crazy idea, though, because of the natural resources. I don't think that it's not like he just wants to buy Greenland, which is kind of how it was portrayed
and the location. And where it is strategically and all of the fresh water that they have. I fully side with Mick Mulvaney on this. I'm glad his mic was hot because the United States, I don't take positions on issues, but the United States should definitely buy Greenland.
All right, Mick, you wrote a new op-ed as well in The Hill today titled, "The President's Budget is Meaningless. The rules on spending need a rewrite." Mulvaney in The Hill. What do you mean?
It doesn't make any difference. The president put his budget out this week. Raise your hand on the panel if you knew the president put his budget out this week. No one cares. Raise your hand. Okay, Max is lying. Max is lying. I can see him from here. Max is lying. The 1973 Budget Act is broken. It was put in place to try and control spending. It does the exact opposite. Right now, the only reason either chamber tends to pass a budget at all, any sort of budget, is so that they can use budget reconciliation to get around the Senate filibuster that we mentioned before. It's a broken process. The appropriations process is broken. No one pays any attention to the president's budget at all when it actually comes to spending. It's a great policy document. It is a meaningless spending document. And if we want to get serious about spending, we have to change the budget process.
So real quick, you were the budget director. Is that role, I mean, you fill in the blank, but is it meaningless then? Like, what is that role?
Meaningless is not the right word. It's not a spending position. Okay, it's a policy position. And one of the things it does is gives people the impression that the president spends money, which he does not. Congress spends the money. Congress appropriates the money. When the president puts a budget out, the public thinks, oh my goodness, this is what we're going to spend next year. It is a completely meaningless document when it comes to how Congress actually spends money.
By the way, I wasn't trying to call your old job meaningless, Mulvaney.
Neither was I. I used to have the job, so I wouldn't.
Yeah, no. I was just curious how you
I actually think it's one of the most important policy positions that people don't ever hear about. But
Mick, you had a huge office as OMB director.
Actually, is exactly right. It is a absolutely critical policy position. Keep in mind, it manages every dollar that flows out of the Treasury out to the executive branch, and the president's policies can influence that. It is a tremendously important position. It just doesn't have anything to do with Congress actually spending money.
For all of that, and there he is still wearing that shirt. I can't explain.
Mick, you didn't hear on break. I said, give me some money. I'm going to redo your wardrobe.
No, hey, he's Keys formal right now. Mick's in the Conch Republic. We love it. He could be out there having a beer, enjoying Florida.
I got a lot of
nice
with comments about this out to dinner last night. So yes, thank you very much.
There you go.
Key West.
Mulvaney, we'll leave it. We'll leave it there. Thanks, Mick. All right, coming up, still here from the Hill, Sarah Sanders, the Republican governor of Arkansas, back in the headline. She is going to war with X. Not in the way you might think, though. So what is Sarah Sanders up to? Leland Vitter, host of On Balance, joins us on the other side of the break. Stay with us.
Special guest Bill O'Reilly on Cuomo.
You're wrong, as usual, but it's your show.
TV's liveliest, most honest debate.
But I really enjoy these conversations, and I look forward to the next one.
Tonight at 8/7 Central, only on NewsNation.
All right, before we say goodbye, here is a story that caught our eye. Arkansas is rolling back its gender-neutral driver's license policy. I had no idea this was a thing until today. Banning the use of X on state IDs, including driver's licenses. The governor in that state, Sarah Sanders, calls the move, quote, common sense. The host of On Balance, Leland Vitter, joins me now. You told me you have props.
Oh, I came prepared. You're a numbers guy, old Fox business guy. This is how you do it. Okay, so you said that you had no idea this was a thing, right?
I had no clue.
Right. Nor did almost everybody in Arkansas, because here it is, right? All right, there's the camera, right? Okay, 3.1 million IDs.
There's 516.
516 with X. That's 0.02% of IDs in Arkansas have this issue. So nobody else knew it was a problem either.
Why even talk about it then?
Right.
Well, you're just putting yourself back in the headlines.
It sounds pretty good during a Republican convention speech, doesn't it?
What do you think her future is?
Bright.
We know her well.
Bright. Yeah. And look, she is a nice woman. She's an honest broker. Very talented politically. And I'm biased. I'm good friends with her dad. I've been covering her family since he was in the Arkansas governor's mansion. But yeah, she's got an extraordinarily bright future. Where exactly it is, who knows? But I think she would be on anybody's list for VP.
Absolutely.